So what is enlightenment? Enlightenment is a state of consciousness in which the mind becomes completely expanded and full of light. Literally, the mind merges with light and consciousness. And in this merger, it's like an impregnation. The divine light of consciousness merges with the human mind and totally transforms that mind. So the mind is no longer busy with just thinking. The mind is really a vehicle for light, so it becomes full of light. And with this light there is tremendous bliss and love and ecstasy. So enlightenment is a state of grace, of love and bliss and ecstasy, where the mind is a vehicle for light rather than just a machine that's cranking away with endless thoughts. And one of the things that happens is silence becomes natural for the mind. It doesn't need to think compulsively. It's just empty and luminous and full of light and love, and thinks when it's needed, but otherwise it just enjoys being silent. So it's a good thing. And it's everybody's destiny. This is the ultimate climax of human evolution.
But why, if it's our natural state in a way, why it is so difficult, or let's say why it's still rare, we could say?
Because it's the climax of evolution. It's not the natural state in the sense that everybody is born enlightened. You certainly aren't born enlightened. It's natural only in the sense that it's going to happen to everyone eventually. But eventually is the key word.
But so would it be a mistake to say that everyone is already enlightened, but they just didn't get still to the point of recognizing that?
That is completely inaccurate. Yeah, it is a mistake. Some teachers say that, but it really isn't true. And you know it's not true. Look around you.
Yeah, for me it's clear.
It's not only clear for you, it's clear for everybody who's honest. It just simply isn't the case. Enlightenment is really the climax of human evolution. And it doesn't happen until there's been a long, long journey of seeking and searching and trying everything possible to transcend the darkness that is, and the unconsciousness that is the human condition, and to merge with that light. And that merger with the light is not just something that is natural for everybody. It's inevitable, it's going to happen, it's certain. But for 99.99% of humanity, it hasn't happened yet. So it isn't accurate to say that everyone is enlightened just by being human. It's really the final peak of evolution.
So would you say that it requires a long and hard road?
I would say that it's a matter of time before it happens to everybody. And that's really all that it is. As time moves along, as your soul grows in consciousness, enlightenment is going to happen eventually. It has to happen. But it requires a long journey of preparation before that happens. So it's really just a question of time. And part of that time will be spent with spiritual practice and discipline and seeking and searching and living with enlightened teachers and trying to achieve this great goal and failing many times. It's all going to happen to every seeker will pass through those experiences. But finally, when the time is right, it happens. And then it seems very easy and very natural. And you go, oh, wasn't any big deal. But of course you've forgotten the 20 lives of preparation before that moment of revelation comes. So yeah, it's easy when it happens.
What is God?
God is the power and intelligence that creates the universe. And the ultimate reality of God is consciousness or awareness. And that awareness has different aspects. The ultimate part and state of that awareness is transcendental consciousness, which is eternal, uncreated, formless, beyond time, beyond space, beyond the universe. And also, that consciousness is the universe. So God is in you and me and in the table and the air and in everything that is the universe. So God is both the eternal beyond and existence at the same time. God is all there is.
Can you be jealous?
Not anymore. I used to be. Negative emotions have left me now. No, jealousy's gone. Fear is gone. It's all gone.
What an enlightened person has more to learn from life?
Well, life is always teaching you something. In terms of spiritual evolution, perhaps there isn't a lot more for people like me to learn. In terms of expanding the limits of consciousness, perhaps there isn't much further to go. If I look back, say 2 or 3 years ago, the state of consciousness I was in then compared to now isn't very different. So there isn't a big growth in consciousness happening anymore. It's a gentle expansion, perhaps. I think the growth now is more in love and in sharing and in being useful. It's more in practical ways, in learning how to be a more effective teacher, learning how to be a father.
You have a child?
Yeah.
It's a she or a he?
It's a boy.
It's a boy?
Yeah.
How old is he?
He's 3.5.
3.5.
So there's always things to learn. Learning how to drive a race car fast and safely. There are things that can always be learned, but in terms of the evolution of consciousness, I don't think there's a lot more in that area for me to learn. But in the application of that, in sharing it, I think there's a lot more to learn, yeah. And the sharing of it is probably the most important part. Learning it inside for yourself is the first part, but being able to share it usefully with other people, I think that's the big challenge, and that part I still have a lot to learn.
Since when are you sharing this?
8 years.
8 years. And what has been until now the most difficult part, if there is any difficulty, because of course...
In my work, you know?
Yeah.
But there isn't any difficulty, it all just happens automatically. Since the very first satsang, I sat down 8 years ago with people for the first time, and somebody asked me a question, and I just started talking. And it's always the same. Whenever anybody asks, I have no idea what I'm going to say, and the words just flow through. So it happens automatically. So it's very easy.
And for the people that are asking questions, what do you think is the main difficulties, or everyone has its own?
Everyone has their own problems.
Everyone has its own.
But the problem that everyone has in common is that they're identified with their mind, and they think this mind is me. And this thinking that the mind is me is called the ego, and that's the basic problem that everybody has. And while you're identified with the mind as me, you'll suffer.
So who gets enlightened?
The soul.
What?
The soul.
The soul?
Yeah. Your individual soul merges with the universal consciousness of God. And in this merger of your individual soul with divine consciousness, there's an explosion of light in your soul and being and heart and mind. So it's your individuality, which is essentially your soul, that becomes enlightened. And part of the soul is the mind. So as I was saying earlier, the mind itself becomes a vehicle for that light. And then the mind is no longer just a narrow little ego mind. It's a big, wide, bright, open, universal mind that's filled with light and love. The mind has tremendous capacity for expansion beyond this narrow little box that most people live in.
sitting now with you and enjoying so much the silence, I remember that this was one of my biggest fears. A couple of years ago, I was in a way really completely different person. I was extremely skeptical, and I was also very afraid of this nothing, of this silence, of this stopping, of this letting something else arise. And I think that many people, they are just keeping their time, keeping busy all the time. Maybe in a way they are running away from that in the most, yeah, it's like I'm left without questions, because of course everyone has its own perfect moment together, so there are no rules and no way to really bring someone there.
Exactly, yeah. And it's always just a matter of timing. And when the timing is right, then the circumstances support your rapid growth.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me, and that's what happened to Buddha, and that's what will happen to everybody. So it's really just a question of when the time is right. And until then, there'll be 1,001 distractions.
But do you have any advice or any recommendation for someone that already starts to have experience?
Well, yes, but I have to respond to individual people,
Yeah.
so I don't have general advice, but when in satsang one person asks me a question,
Okay.
then I respond to that person. But when you ask me a general question, it's more difficult to respond because everyone's in different circumstances. General advice, yes, be more conscious. Accept everything. Trust life. And trust that life is not accidental. Trust that it's part of a great divine plan. And if you trust that life is part of a divine plan, then you can accept that whatever happens to you, including all of the strange things, is necessary. It's part of God's destiny for you. And if you can accept and grow in consciousness while you're accepting, life will be sweet. Suffering will be less. So for general advice, I can say that to everyone. And by growing in consciousness and acceptance, you'll also grow in love. Automatically, naturally, your heart will open. And your heart will open in a way which is not just an emotional opening, but which is a deeper spiritual opening. It'll be an opening of the heart which stays with you, which doesn't just come and go with feelings. It's not like you fall in love and you fall out of love, but the heart just opens and opens and opens, and you remain in love, even without a boyfriend. And this will happen automatically just by cultivating consciousness and acceptance. Love will grow automatically.
So it was helpful for you to have teachers? Did you have teachers?
Yes, it's essential to have teachers. Otherwise it's impossible. The journey is long and difficult, and without someone who has actually been ahead and knows that it's possible and can say, hey, however difficult this gets, I know that it's possible. It's happened to me. It can also happen to you. Without that support, and more than that, enlightened people take you into their heart. They open up a door, a sacred space, and they give you a taste. They let you know that it actually isn't just a dream. They let you know directly that it is possible. Without that support, it's almost certainly not going to happen. So yes, I had teachers.
How can we say anything with words that can describe what is happening?
It's difficult. The words are very pale reflections of the reality which is really beyond words. It's difficult.
Because I can clearly feel all this immense flow of energy passing through. But it's something that is invisible to the eyes.
And it's hard to describe also. What does bliss mean? What does ecstasy mean? What does cosmic love mean? What does awareness mean? You know, these words are just little pieces of information, but the experience behind them is so vast, so huge, so indescribable. It's okay. And a lot of the time in satsang I share in silence, directly, heart to heart, and being to being, and that's good. And words have their place as well, they're needed. But they really are a very pale reflection of the higher reality.
How can someone recognize if someone is enlightened?
It's difficult. Who are you to judge? What you can recognize is how you feel when you're with somebody else. If you feel lifted up, if you feel that something special and new and beautiful is happening to you, then that's enough for you. That's significant for you. But how can unenlightened people judge if somebody else is enlightened or not? It's very difficult to know for sure. What you can know is what you experience. So perhaps it's enough just to know what happens to you.